Hi, everyone. Welcome to the video version of the Reviving Vet Med podcast. I'm Dr. Marie Hollowaychuk, and I'm your host, and I'm really excited to share with you our first interview on the podcast. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Katie Gallagher. Katie is somebody I've been working with for some time now, as she is co-founder of Scribenote, AI-powered scribe software company that I have been using personally for the last several months, and who is also sponsoring this podcast. Katie graduated from the Ontario Veterinary College in 2016, and for the last few years has been working in practice and with her company Scribenote to support veterinarians in having the most efficient day possible. And so in my conversation with Katie today, we get into the impact that medical records can have on the mental health and well-being of veterinarians. We talk about the ways in which AI-powered scribe software is helping to alleviate those challenges. And we talk about all the ways that there had been positive impacts when it comes to this software and other similar softwares in the veterinary space. So this is a really fun conversation. I do hope you enjoy it. I urge you to please subscribe to our channel so that you can get these episodes as they drop. We will be sharing video episodes for all of our interviews that we have scheduled for the podcast. So enjoy the episode and make sure to check out the show notes for the resources. All right. Hi, Katie. It is so wonderful to have you on the podcast with me today. I'm going to just jump right into it with our first question, and that is, what inspired you to tackle the challenge of medical record keeping in vet medicine?
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here chatting with you today. Well, to answer that question, I'd say it wasn't really a plan. So the origin story goes a bit like this. Back in 2019, I had been out of school for a few years, and I was constantly staying late at work, finishing records. So much so that my staff would joke that I should have a kennel in the back to sleep there, because I basically felt like I never left. And it was Christmas break in 2019, and my brother asked to follow me around at the clinic to see, why I was always there for so long. And so I asked my boss and brought him with me on a 10-hour shift. He basically was a fly on the wall during that whole day. So came into every exam with me, stood in the corner of the room. You know how exam rooms are, really small. So, multiple pets with an extra person. I always ask permission, obviously. And at the end of the day, we sat down to do records. And he turned to me while I was typing those up and said, wow, like this is, really, you're doing everything twice. Like you're duplicating this work, you're talking to your clients, everything that you're going through is already being captured in the exam room. What a difficult thing to have to write it all down at the end of such a busy day. Like I'm sure there's data that's being lost, and I'm going to solve this problem for you. Give me 10 years. And so that was 2019, and the technology wasn't quite where it needed to be at the time. Him and one of our other co-founders started immediately working on the problem, and they were even like human in the loop scribes for me for a while, but we realized like that wasn't really scalable. And our first automated product was, I guess, released in 2023. We had like a beta group in March. And immediately when I started using it, it drastically improved my medical record time. And I texted him probably one of the first days I used it that I was leaving work on time and was able to get home. So it's been a very strange trajectory, but very exciting. And I'm glad it didn't take him 10 years.
No doubt. Wow, that is amazing. What a wonderful brother, seeing a problem and attempting to fix it and fixing it really and still continuing to fix it today. I'm so curious, what do you think makes keeping up with medical records such a challenge for veterinarians? I've had the experience going into an ER shift and seeing, a dozen cases, 15 cases, and then having hours and hours and hours past the end of my shift, staying there almost like a second shift for the medical records. Why is it such a challenge?
Yeah, well, exactly like you said, there are not enough hours in the day. There really aren't, especially when you're back to back in appointments, when things are complicated. The other day I was at work and I saw 10 cases in 5 hours, and that was, you know, not only normal, healthy pets, because those we know the documentation, like you still have to do a good job about communicating and preventative health care. But adding in blood work and x-rays and things like that when you've got all these cases back to back becomes really challenging, especially when things are kind of urgent, right? So obviously, like your priority cases, you work up in that instant. You do the blood and the rads, and you get those results to that client, even if it means bumping your appointments back a little bit to kind of continue moving forward with the case. I find a lot of times like cost is a big factor there. Like if people don't have funds and we need to do some things stepwise, um, then it takes even longer, right? We have to get the blood, go over the results of the blood, make a new plan. And so like being really like partnered with your clients and talking about costs and like making decisions for next steps is one reason. Then the booking, like, we've got 30-minute, 40-minute appointments to deal with multiple health concerns often. Again, because people first of all, don't really have this like unlimited time to bring their pets in every other week. You know what I mean? They save all their concerns for one visit, which is fair, but it adds a lot. And then I'd say probably like animal behavior. Like if we've got pets that are more fearful, we have to take time, coax them to be more comfortable, need more hands. God, there are so many reasons. To me, it's always been the last thing that I've focused on because being in the appointment, communicating with the client, like building that partnership and like educating, that is way more important to me than what I write down, which probably you shouldn't tell the licensing bodies about that. But, the records were obviously like important, but I just never got to them in my allotted 30 minutes. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. And yeah, I mean, 30, 40 minutes if you're lucky, right? Sometimes people are doing appointments every 15, 20 minutes. And like you
Hmm.
said, just the nature of vet medicine, where you have the patient being the pet or the animal, and then the proxy, which is the client, and it's very complicated. It makes the process not very efficient when we have to go back and forth between hands on the patient and connecting with the families. And like you said, you throw fearful animals into the mix or cost constrained owners into the mix, and then it becomes even more inefficient. I have connected with individuals in our community who have fallen so behind on their records. Like we're talking months behind on their records. And I make a point of never leaving the hospital without an unfinished record. It's just a policy that I've always stuck to, mostly because in ER, you just never know when that patient might come back and, what they might need in the process. How do you feel that falling behind on records impacts both the quality of care in vet medicine and the quality of life or the mental health for the veterinarian themselves?
Yeah, so even just hearing you say months behind on records like gives me a bit of anxiety. I think the most I've ever been behind, and this was obviously well before Scribenote, is maybe a week. And I think realistically, like it reduces your accuracy hugely. Even if you're taking notes during the appointment, like, first of all, how easy is it to be on the floor with a giant dog and scribbling things down as you're doing them? And then again, if you're wanting to be really present and like thorough in your exams and your client communication, writing kind of takes away from that a little bit. So super stressful to be that far behind, I think. You know, I think there's another, staying late to finish records all the time gets really quite exhausting and definitely leads to burnout.
Hmm.
Um, as well as, if I have a day off a week or if I'm on home at the weekend, I shouldn't be finishing up on records.
Hmm.
Like it adds to that, you feel like you're never done.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think realistically, like the inaccuracy of leaving records for a long time, and then that like constant stress and pressure to
Hmm.
you have this like thing looming over your head and
Hmm.
they just seem to snowball, right? Like you don't finish records for one shift, well, then you're behind immediately when you start the next shift and it's just like this level of uh like stress that you just don't really need.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's very anxiety provoking for me as well, even hearing people say that, they've been behind that long. I mean, for me, it's hard enough to remember the information from just a few patients ago, never mind like a few weeks ago I saw this patient. Like that's just impossible for me. And I think, you and I have talked before that there is this requirement from licensing bodies that you are supposed to have your records done within 24 hours, depending on where you practice. And so there is this legal requirement or this regulatory requirement that you do have these medical records complete. So I think that's another stressor for individuals that don't want any sort of board complaint, or if a board complaint does come to fruition and they ended up completing the records much, much later, like you said, they're not going to be nearly as accurate. Well, all of this, brings us to the big question, which is what is the solution? And as you shared, you and your brother have created this company that has this scribe AI supported scribe software to help with medical record keeping. I would love to hear if you can give a bit of an overview about AI supported scribe software and how it works in terms of supporting documentation.
Okay. So basically, the principle of it is we have an app that you can record from on your phone or an iPad or another tablet, as well as recording from like a web browser. And you press the button, record your appointment as normal, review your exam findings out loud and things like that. And then at the end, press stop, and you get a fully formatted medical record without any additional chit chat. So you can still have a good relationship with your clients. You can talk to them about, the weather or sports or,
Mhm.
their kids or, anything like that. And it will filter out anything that is not medically relevant.
Mhm.
So, really wanting to like reduce how much change you have to make in your workflow. Um, it's super, super easy. And like the goal is that the AI takes everything in that transcript, so that recording, and condenses it and filters it into the right categories.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
a broad, very broad overview.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
there's lots of features.
Mhm.
So can use it for not only your medical records, but your phone calls, your dental procedures, your abdominal ultrasounds, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think Scribenote in particular, I'm of course biased because I've used the software myself for many months now. And it's so funny because I look at the transcript in terms of what it's actually recording, and then I look at my medical record, and you can see all of the fluff, like you said, that we talk about with our families, with our owners when we're doing our appointments, and how it makes this beautifully written, concise, detailed medical record. It's just mind-boggling to me. As somebody who's very evidence-based, who's done a lot of research, and specifically in this field of mental health and wellness, I'm curious, what is the research supporting the well-being and mental health benefits of Scribe software or AI-assisted documentation, either for clinicians or veterinarians? What's out there?
So I don't. Obviously, I haven't read everything there is to read on this, but I do think that there's a lot of positive research out there so far, and I think there's lots that still needs to be done. So, from what I've seen, in human medicine, we can see like better patient experience, which is a big one where the doctor doesn't have to be constantly typing. They
Mm,
can potentially like listen and again partner in. I don't remember the last time I went to the doctor and actually had someone like just like have a conversation with me, right?
mm,
Um so I think that's a big thing. And then obviously less time spent doing records outside of work hours.
mhm.
I think in the one study I read, it was called pajama time, like time not in the time not in the hospital or in the clinic. So, that home time where you really shouldn't be taking your work home with you, because we obviously know these professions are high level of like reduced work-life balance as it is, trying to get them home on time without having to bring their follow-ups home.
Mhm.
So, I like I said, I think more does need to be done. And I think sometimes it's going to be a bit challenging to do that research because some of the things are more like intangible, right? Like
Mhm.
how people are feeling, how you just are less exhausted at the end of the day
Mhm.
because you don't have as much to remember. You don't have as much that feels like it's like, on your shoulders at the end of the day. And I don't I'm sure that's a bit of a harder, more subjective and not objective type of research and probably will need to be like more retrospective, right? Like comparing however many years in practice without and then with, etc. So,
Mhm.
I think that sure needs to come in some point. And we actually have some research stuff in the works. Like, obviously, again, it takes a long time to kind of set up proper studies and things like that. But the one thing I wanted to bring up is that I think focusing on, the mental health aspect and how much we can reduce like the burden and
Mhm.
the stress and like, the difficulties in the field is much better than looking at like how much more we can see, how much more we can bill, how much, like that's really not. I think it's off the mark realistically.
Mhm.
Like it brings it back to like profit, which, obviously every business needs to make money, but I think most vets, and I'd probably all vets, are always working hard and doing their absolute max every shift. And
Mhm.
so just to like take something off their plate is the
Mhm.
better way to like approach it and not this like, let's get you this tool so you can do more for us.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been thinking about with
Yeah.
regards to like research. Maybe we should focus more on what it can do for us in terms of like self-care.
I love that. I think the mental health benefits can't be understated. I as again someone who's used software like this, like Scribenotes and others that are out there, it is such a weight off my mind to know that this is recorded. Even if I can't get back to this, let's say before the end of today for whatever reason, I know that it's there. I know I don't have to have that mental exhaustion and that fatigue of trying to store it in my head. It's there. I will get to it. It's, at least somewhat documented, if I've been able to cut and paste whatever is there, even if I haven't proofread it. And that is just a huge alleviation. And then not having the anxiety of, oh my gosh, there's all these records and they're piling up. And I don't even remember, what I did this morning, never mind what I did last week. So, and yeah, for sure, the efficiency, if you can get home for more pajama time, I love this. I love this for all of us.
Yeah.
What a great analogy. What kind of feedback have you received from the veterinarians you've connected with who've used Scribenote? Because I know that you connect a lot with your users. You're always making new improvements to the software and introducing new tools and other things. What stands out for you that you could share to make this really tangible for people?
So we have a internal channel in our team messaging. It's called the Wall of Love. And basically, any positive feedback we get goes there, just to help us remind ourselves why we do what we do, right? Because the people in this profession are really amazing. They're really hardworking people, and we just have to keep remembering that we can continue to help them make their day easier. So there's definitely some pieces of feedback that make me smile a lot. And I think the most recent one that I've heard from a veterinarian whose team was starting to pilot Scribenote was a bit skeptical at first. And then after, I think a week or two, they reached out to him to get some feedback on how things were going. And he replied, you are going to have to pry this from my cold, dead hands because I will never practice without it. So even people who are skeptical about using it, I think find it more helpful than they initially thought.
Yeah.
And you're right, like we do make a ton of improvements, and it's usually based on user feedback
Mm,
because that's how the whole product started. And obviously it's nice to have boots on the ground and like a general understanding of what is needed, what issues we're facing, like how can we improve productivity, like how can we take off some more burden from the veterinarians and the technician support staff who are using us. So yeah, the like if you guys have any feedback or anything that you'd like to see, like
mm,
wish list items, we have a whole wish list that people put in, and
mm,
we're trying always to check things off there.
mm,
It's just obviously time and engineering effort that takes, and we don't like to release features that are,
mm,
half good. They have to be like fully useful, fully intuitive, and kind of go along with in general, our mentality when we
mm,
put things out there. But
mm,
yeah, most of the time, like people are just saying things like it's life changing. It's
mm,
helped them to get home and spend time with their family, like sit
mm,
down and have dinner with their family again.
mm,
People who told us that they finally have the one weekend day that they usually set aside to do records
mm,
to do other things
mm,
like
mm,
their hobbies. So it's really really rewarding. One of the first, I think, back at one of the first conferences, so like back in 2023 when we first launched, I had someone come up to me, and I think, if I remember correctly, they were in behavior medicine, and they basically almost started crying, like that
mm,
this was like such a big thing and took up so much of their time, and so it can be really impactful for people, because it is required, and we do need to put effort into it, to keep on top of our records. Just taking that off people's plates. It's been really awesome to see all
mm.
the good feedback.
I love that. Well, I'm convinced. I am definitely not one of the skeptics out there. I too will not practice without this software again. Um, let's get practical. What is the best way for a busy clinic to get started with software like this? Do you have any tips to help smooth out that transition?
So I'd say there's a few things that you should look into if you're looking into starting with an AI scribe. So what is the platform's ability to support you? Like, do they have people that are available to help? Um, we have support in app and on our website, like people that we work with that are able to quickly solve problems for people that are starting to get set up. Is there effort put into help documents and videos? And is it intuitive and easy for you to use? Like, does it, you know, reduce the ability of you to need to change your workflow, right? Like, because I think a big thing about adopting any new software, it's like, how much do I have to change to get this into my routine?
Mhm.
Because we all know like routine is what helps us stay sane, first of all, but also, feel like a bit of comfort in our day to day, right? So just having something that you can easily add in that's like reliable is important too. So I think all of those things, looking into all of those things are good. And obviously, like having a team that has connection to the industry is important
Mhm.
because there are a lot of different companies now. And yeah, I think just doing your due diligence there is important too, right? You
Mhm.
know where things are coming from.
Yeah, you want to be able to work with a team that knows a little bit about vet med and the
Mhm.
unique challenges that we face. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's say that there are practice owners or managers or other leaders that are listening and they want their teams to start using this. Like they're tired of seeing their associates stay hours and hours after their shifts, and yet there is resistance there. How could they get their team members to embrace this kind of technology?
Um, so first of all, kudos to them if they're like, approaching it from this, a perspective. Sometimes it's not what we see, but I'm really happy when it is.
Mhm.
I think being open to it and like potentially um, helping to facilitate pilot program and training and getting those things set up just so that it's not doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm sure it can feel like a top-down direction,
Mhm.
like this is something else we want you to do when you're already doing a lot.
Mhm.
So it may feel like it comes from like a place like that. But I think when teams are promoting this, like when leadership is bringing this to the table, that it's important to make sure you just give it a chance, keep an open mind, right? Because it certainly helps people, I think, more than they think it will.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so I guess just being open to like making time for training and providing the necessary support and resources so that you're not just like thrown in like
Mhm.
a trial by fire kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know you talked a little bit about hesitations before, and that was a big hesitation for me is like, how am I going to fit this into my workflow? Like, I have my way of doing things, and, like, is this just going to slow me down? What if the technology fails me or whatever it might be? And so there is a little bit of a learning curve and a little bit of fear of the unknown if you haven't used it before. I'm curious what other hesitations that you've heard of from people who are maybe still a little bit reluctant to use software like this within their practices, and how would you address that?
So I think that we've heard a little bit of criticism in a few areas where like, oh, this is gonna try and like take jobs away from
Mhm.
human scribes, from reception, from assistants. And I think ultimately like that is definitely not our goal.
Mhm.
Like being a vet on the floor, I've worked in clinics where we've had, somebody in the room assisting us, and half the time those people have like that is like one of their several jobs, right?
Mhm.
Like that is not the only thing that they're doing. Often they get pulled away, often it might not be their passion to stand in there and type when you're, going through your exam and things. So I think freeing up people in the clinic that are really, really needed and really highly trained to do the jobs that they love to help keep them in this field for longer
Mhm.
is more of what we're trying to do, and also helping to relieve the administrative burden for
Mhm.
the doctors and any support staff can use it as well. I think
Mhm.
that's one thing to remember. Maybe just taking a step back and looking at it from a perspective of like not all new companies are trying to take your jobs. Like we're trying to
Mhm.
augment what we do, right?
Mhm.
Improve the lives of the people who make this profession possible, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that I think is a big thing. Um, does that answer your question
Yeah,
or?
I think so. I mean, I hear you. I think that's when people hear AI, that's the first thing they think of, right? Is like, oh, job stealers. And as somebody who owns a business myself and really strives to be very, very efficient, I'm always thinking of, do I really need to be doing this task, or could I find someone else or some sort of technology to do this task for me or to make this task more efficient? And I just think about, like, you painted the picture of an assistant standing in the room, typing on the computer. And I'm just like, how big of a waste of time is that when they could be assisting with procedures or maybe even seeing their own appointments or connecting with clients on the phone, versus standing in the room and typing into a computer when we've got software to do that now. So that's very helpful. Thank you. I'm curious, speaking of AI in general and the some of the misgivings and concerns that people have, what do you see as the future for AI, AI powered tools in veterinary medicine?
Yeah, so that's a big question. So these tools are, first of all, I'm going to be honest, probably way over my head. I am not the engineer. I did not go to school for any of the technology things, and like it blows my mind what some of this stuff can do. But they're changing every day, every day. And so I don't even think we can currently fathom what things are going to look like in 5 years. But I think the big like onus is on people who are knowledgeable in this field and like
Mhm.
the engineers and the people who are driving this technology leadership to continue to innovate to help our teams and to help in veterinary medicine. We definitely have some things up our sleeve that we're working on. And I'm not going to go into those too much just because I don't want to release any trade secrets too early. But there there are, I think, big things coming, and I really think technology will help to move things forward. Like it
Mhm.
has been fairly stagnant, I think. Like if we look back over the last, 20 years, we have some
Mhm.
pretty like legacy software out there. And
Mhm.
fair enough, like, there's a lot of issues in the profession. Software wasn't on the forefront and the technology wasn't where it needed to be to get there. But now it is, and I think things are changing rapidly. So
Yeah.
it's really exciting. And to be on a team like that helps to promote that and helps to kind of drive that change has been really rewarding. Just a very unique experience, one that I never really thought I would
Mhm.
have. So.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. Well, I am very excited to see what is coming down the pipe. I definitely have been leveraging technology more and more in my business for efficiency, and it's very daunting. I'm definitely not a person that would claim to be tech savvy, but once I get the hang of these tools, it is just mind blowing in terms of how was I ever working before without this, So I love this. Well, one last question for you, Katie. For those who are curious about trying Scribenote, where's the best place for them to learn more?
Okay, so we have a few places. We have a website, so it's www.scribenote.com. There's a ton of help documents on there. The website is also beautifully designed by one of our co-founders who really has an eye for all of the branding. So have a look at that. And then we do have Facebook and Instagram. Check out our YouTube for sure. There's a ton of little tips and tricks videos that are all really short. They're mostly all of me doing like little product feature walkthroughs. And, we know that people are busy. They don't have time to sit down and watch a half an hour demo. So we've tried to break things up into really small segments to help people learn the tools and be able to pick them up and use them really easily. So definitely a few places to check them out. Check us out. yeah, and then they can also reach out to our support team, which we have, like I said, in-app or on the website. So yeah, lots of areas where they can reach out to us, and we're happy to hear from people.
I love this. Well, Katie, this is such helpful information, such a great conversation. I've been wanting to chat with you for a while about this big behemoth that we have in vet medicine being our medical records and how transformative your software has been. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time away from your important work at Scribenote to come and talk to us today. And I look forward to seeing what you have in store for us.
Thanks so much, Marie. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I hope that everybody gives us a try and makes their life better in the like while they're doing that.
Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.